I'm gonna record to this computer. Boop. I slacked out. I did not slack out. So let me slack out the lectures here. Classroom. All right. It's going to be our morning lecture. We're going to be moving into. That's cool, Paul. Paul's having Zoom issues. Is Paul on? Did he jump on? Yeah, he's on. Okay. Yeah, make sure you're marked in Garnet as well. Sweet. So let's just do this. Let's poll how do you like Rails so far? Yes, love it. Just doing a little poll. I still don't know. Still on the fence. Nope. Node Express my thing. All right, here we go. Just like that, a poll. How is everyone feeling? Still on the fence. Lots of still on the fences. Okay. I think up to this point, all you really did in the last class was just create models, right? It was like back-end database stuff first. Still on the fence. Yeah, I mean, you really haven't learned much about Rails, so I could see how I'd be on the fence too. Like, you didn't really give me much but a back-end of models. However, from what you did get from the last class, the ability to have the date, create the database, the schema, populate it using the seed file, like looping over an array of things, and populating the tables, renaming the tables, the migration files themselves that control it. There's a lot of control that Rails has over something like Express, where you are much more able to do whatever you want. It's kind of like Clay. Express is kind of like Clay. You just do whatever you want with it. And Rails is a bit more strict in what you could do with it. I really don't know what to compare Clay to again, so I'm kind of stuck there. But Rails is very opinionated, and for good reason. What was the advantage of, say, React over someone just writing code in plain JavaScript or jQuery? Was there any advantage to using React? Anyone have any ideas? What allowed me as a React developer to look at your React project and be able to immediately figure a few things out? What allowed that process? How about Yashira? I'm going to pick the on cameras. I'm going to hit everyone. No one gets away. What do you think, Yashira? No?
Repeat the question.
Okay. What about React allowed me as a developer, another React developer, to go over to your application and really kind of like almost intuitively see what you were doing? Versus if I allowed you to create the memory game in JavaScript or jQuery, what would I first need to do really at that point in time? I even then don't think I asked the question really great.
Yeah, I'm stuck on the intuitively see
Gotcha.
what I'm doing as opposed to.
All right, if I had 10 people creating the memory game using jQuery, is there a good chance that they probably created similar but different, right? Function names would be different. Variable names would be different. They might nest things in other places, import things from other files. Could there be variations in how it was coded?
I would say yeah.
Okay, right,
Yeah,
intuitively,
they
yeah,
have their own coding style. Yeah.
exactly.
Hmm.
So if I walked over to a Rails app, I'm sorry, a React app, do you think there would be more structure there? Like I could look at a component.
Oh, I see.
You see, like I could
Yeah.
look at a component and know if it had state, it was responsible for keeping track of a piece of information of the app, right?
Yeah, in Rails, well, I would say yes, because I know it's opinionated. So if they're looking at it and there's certain syntax that has to be there, so I would say yeah, if
Yes.
I'm answering that correctly.
No, you are. Like
Okay.
a Rails app would allow me to walk over and be like,
Hmm.
oh, yeah, if you called it this thing, then there must be a file over here called
Right.
that thing.
Hmm.
Can't You just can't name things whatever you want to name them.
Right.
There's a
Yeah.
structure there that you just can't get away from. And
Right.
that's why I'm bringing up React. React is the same way. Like you create components and components render other components, right? And two components cannot speak to one another that are siblings. They have to talk to the parent. So I already know if this component wanted to talk to this component, it'd have to lift state up and send it back down. There's an organization there and a structure that allows me to walk over to someone's React app and kind of see how things are being rendered, right? Functional components versus stateful components. If I see something like component did mount, I know they're running that thing one time only when the component mounts, right? And there's a good chance they're probably updating state. There's some themes there. And Rails has a lot of those kind of same things. It's really opinionated, right? Uh, and so it does that whole convention over configuration, right? That's the concept. And I knew Ryan kind of emphasized that last week. Convention over configuration, meaning it's more strict and opinionated on what you do versus just like, I'm going to configure it this way, which is an Express app, right? One issue sometimes we have with teaching, I have with teaching some of the Express lessons is some instructors create a routes folder and then puts the routes folders in there. Some instructors create a controllers folder and then put the controllers in there, and then some just leave it all in server.js. And so I have to look at the labs and lessons and be like, oh, wait a second, like that's different than the way I just taught it. We use this. They use that. The thing works great, but I need to take a moment back and be like, wait a second, why would they do that? What were they thinking? Maybe they thought, oh, this thing really isn't doing much of a controller-esque thing. It's just doing one thing. So let's just put it in routes and it'll make the call to the database, right? I would be more like, no, let's separate it. Separations of concerns. Create another folder. Add that controller file in there and like create as many controller files as needed. That would be my personal preference. And then that would be a pattern I look for when I write my own stuff. So React's the same. Rails is kind of the same way. Okay. So, so today's objectives, I'm going to just do a little review of last class because from what I saw, you really just kind of built out some of the models, right? You just did some of the models. Migration files, seeding the database. We didn't get into the front end, but today we are going to get into the building out the routes and the controllers. Like that's going to be our thing, routes and controllers. We won't, I'm not going to spend too much time exploring the file structure. Ryan showed you the file structure, but there's a lot going on. And depending on the Rails commands you run, you can actually have quite a bit of additional folders and files generated for you, like on the fly, like that. If I run I think the last time you did a -- API to create an API server, which means you don't have any views. Your Rails server is like, hey, I don't need to actually send any HTML. I'm only going to be sending JSON because I'm an API server. Versus, hey, I also want to render pages. I want to take the data, put it in, and then send that data along, okay? You were lucky enough to be spared that in Express because Express uses EJS templates, or a templating engine, it could do for server-side running, but you used React, right? We didn't do EJS in this class, correct? And Node and Express? Okay, yeah. So you kind of lucked out. Sometimes they do teach it. EJS is taught in other cohorts, and there's a movement now to get out of server-side templating and just teach React. If you're going to see anything on the screen, that's going to be a React rendered thing versus a server-side rendered template. Okay.
We did EJS.
You did EJS. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, so you know what an EJS is like.
With
right?
the squids and the...
Yeah. How, your preference, would you prefer to go down the road of React or EJS?
React.
Yeah, React, right? And that's the general tendency. And React emulates the single page app, right? Where I give you all the files, and as you click, the component makes the call to get the data. Data comes back. React then figures out what needs to be updated. Versus when I change a route to a Node Express server rendering via EJS, it takes the data, compiles it into one file, right? And sends me the whole file. When it sends me the whole file, my page has to re-render, right? So you're not doing single page apps anymore. You're doing kind of multi-page apps because my browser needs to refresh itself to get this new HTML file and kind of load that, okay? Rails has ERB, which is similar to that. And if anything, I'm just going to show you what ERB is. Well, we're not in any way, shape, or form going to be doing ERBs. We're doing React since that's what everybody wants anyway, right? It's React, React, React. Okay. So for MVC, you did learn, and this is interesting, this question right here. We just did some interviews for my day class. They are 2 weeks away from graduating. Okay. They have 1 more week of Rails, a week of projects, and then they're off, and then they graduate. So I think 2 weeks ago we did some interviews, some mock interviews with them. And one of the questions I asked was, hey, explain MVC and how is it used in an application? And I can't tell you how many people just like froze, like a deer in headlights, like MVC, what is that? Like, they couldn't really answer the question. And that question should be something that you write an answer down to. Like, go get open up a Google Doc and start writing down the interview questions and answers, because that's how you're going to master the interview process, by predefining what your answer is so you can cover your bases as best you can. So MVC, as you had learned, is, this model view controller, okay? So if you were on an interview and asked, hey, what is MVC and how is it used, how would you answer that? Paul, how would you answer that question? You're on an interview. Thank you for coming, Paul. Welcome. Seems like from your resume, looks like you kind of know what MVC is. Can you explain what MVC is and how it's used in an application? Well, Paul just jumped up. He's having problems with his Zoom. I almost felt like oh, there he is. He's back in the right corner now. Okay. Paul, can you hear me? All right. You want to answer the question or no? We can pass it on. I know you're having some problems, so I don't. All right. I'm just getting thumbs up. Okay. What about, all right, Mike is not working. Okay. All right. Dustin, what about you? What do you think?
It's, connects an app to a database using controllers to define the different routes that may, lead to different components throughout the app. Views to actually display the information on the page based on what's brought back from the database, and the models to give a structure to things being housed in the database to maintain consistency across users.
Okay, I like that. It's kind of a good overview. Chrissy, if you were asked that question, how would you answer it?
I thought his answer was pretty good. I would say models give the structure to what we're defining, views display things on the page, and controllers control your routes.
Okay. So I like that answer too. Very similar answers there. I would probably answer it in such a way that describes it as, the model itself is not only the structure of your tables, but it's how or the mechanism by which you make those requests. Okay, if you're using Mongo, then you'll use the Mongo tools to actually make the request to the model. If it was Active Records, which is what we'll be doing today, well, we would use Active Record to make the request. So the model becomes the mechanism by which you talk to the database. That's really what it is. It's whether we're reading, writing, updating, the model has a direct connection to the database. Now, the controller is the one that fields requests. So I'm going to have a route, and the route's going to determine which controller it should talk to. And that controller then makes the decision whether it needs to go to a model to get information, or it just needs to process something and respond back. Controllers don't always have to go to a model. Sometimes they're just processing information and then responding to that. And then the controller will make a decision at that point in time what view, if needed, it should present, or what data it needs to pass to the view in order for the view to be sent to the user. Okay, but it's important that the model is really speaks to the database. That's what it does. It's responsible for talking to the database itself. The controller is responsible for talking or executing a model, and the model talks to the database. Like, the controller never should be talking to the database directly. It should go through the model, and the model should handle that. Okay, so yeah, it's one way to answer it, right? You on an interview, you might also get things like, MVC is just one design pattern. There's several other design patterns that are out there. It's a model, but Quincy answer. Yep. There's MVP, Model View Presenter, MVVC, Model View Controller. Some of those come from this book by, is it Adami? Oh yeah, Adami Asami. I think I might have shared this book out with everyone at one point in time. I'm just going to go to the top where he goes over the design patterns, because in the table of contents here, JavaScript MV star patterns, the MVC pattern, MVP pattern, MVVM pattern. So there's more than one pattern out there. You should know that too. They may ask you, hey, do you know of other patterns? Coming straight out of the dev school, knowing that we all probably emphasize the MVC pattern, you're probably not going to be able to answer the other ones. But just the fact that you were exposed to this, you can say, yeah, well, MVC is just one model, and there's other models out there that are being used. Okay. I think I did Slack this out one time. I'm just going to Slack it out. It's in the lecture, but I think it's a really cool book. It's a lot of information. It's like filled with patterns and things like that. Okay. Ruby on Rails is our MVC framework. We already know that. How does it compare with Node? I think I'm going to kind of go past this because you already kind of covered this. Convention over configuration. We know that we want to be more strict in how we write our content. Okay. The Rails guides are also an awesome place to start working through the material. Have we assigned anything from the Rails guides for you to look at? Any like assignments been done? No? Okay. I think we just introduced Rails yesterday in my day class, and we're having them work through this whole guide on how to build an app over the weekend using Rails. It's a tutorial. It's no different than the React. I think you might have done React Tic-Tac-Toe. Was that ever assigned? React Tic-Tac-Toe from the React documentation. Okay, sometimes we'll have, not React Monster, React. If we are introducing React on Monday, we might go and just have everyone walk through this tutorial of building out Tic-Tac-Toe, this final result here of Tic-Tac-Toe in React. And they don't know in React at all, but they can go here, walk through the tutorial, and then kind of play the game, figure it out, all this code. I think they would have been writing, I don't know, 143 lines of code over the weekend, well explained, okay? If you want a refresher in React, definitely walk through that tutorial, but Rails also has awesome documentation. It's really, really, really good. Okay. So let's, I'm going to start working through it. I have an instructor examples folder here. That's what I'm going to be working in. Don't work in that folder. I didn't add a student folder here. So if you did a Git pull, then you should have all the material. And I would just suggest creating, you know, student examples or whatever you want to create. So I'm going to go in here and here's my server. I'm going to change into instructor examples, and here I am, right? Nothing. I'm going to say Rails new books. What's different between this command versus the command that you had learned? I'm just going to open that up. We're going to run this. Actually, you know what? Run it now, because it does take a moment to run. Run that, and then I'm going to go to Unit 2, lesson notes. And you had created something using the new API command. You did something like this. So then the question would be, what's the difference between doing it like this and doing it like that? Okay?
Can you share your screen?
Oh, snap. Wow, this whole time. I wish somebody would have said something sooner. Apologize for that. Okay. Everyone see? Okay, so I just ran this command. Let me go back here. I ran this command. Okay. So I'm gonna slack that out. Rails new books. Okay. And so doing this creates this books app, right? It's a lot of stuff being created there. Okay. And so my question was, what was the difference between that command and this command? Anyone have an idea of the limitations of, I'm slacking out the second command, but don't execute the second command in any way, right? What's the difference between the two?
You don't have flags in that, and you're not adding, or you're not skipping Git.
Okay.
And something with Postgres also.
Okay. All right. So yeah, so what we're doing here is this, what does this flag do? What was that flag responsible for? Anyone know?
I guess an API server. It's an
Okay.
API.
What would that have meant though? Like, I know you're saying API, and we know what if you want an interview, and I was like, hey, what's an API server? What would you?
It can send and receive requests.
Okay. What does it send? Because that's what makes it an API server.
It sends JSON.
Yeah, right? I mean, APIs nowadays use JSON as the predominant file format, right? There are some servers out there that use, that send XML. You wouldn't be doing that anymore. I think I might have warned some students about that. Like, they'll look for APIs, right? I think project 2 is like, find an API. Some students find APIs and like, this is cool. It sends it as XML. And then I'm like, poof, don't do that. Find something that sends JSON. Like, you already know how to work with JSON. XML needs to be converted into JSON. So you need now a third-party tool to do that.
So
So-
what would be the benefit of an XML?
I'm not really sure there is benefit to it.
I just know that at work we work with a company called CGM, and anytime I open up a ticket with them, they always say, okay, we're going to check the XML files or something.
Yeah. So XML, think of the Wayback Machine when data was being transported. I don't know which one came first, XML or HTML, not really sure. I'm going to say XML probably. And XML is a very strict version of HTML, open and closing tags. all the data is structured in tags, and there must be an opening and a closing tag. And it's just a way of structuring the information. Versus HTML, which is a little bit more like self-closing tags, things like that. Like XML is about data, structuring data using tags. And JSON is about structuring data using objects and arrays, right? So I don't know. I think in the Wayback Machine, XML was just the way that they made the decision to send the data back and forth. Maybe it was pre, like, you know, JavaScript, you know, some basic coding languages, and they were just like, hey, we need to get data from here to there. How do we do that? And all we have is like these files that we can send over the web. So why don't we just send an XML file where the data is structured? But that has been, XML has been replaced with JSON for the majority of the sites using APIs. There are servers, and maybe like your company, that does that. And then, you know, I'd ask them, like, what's the advantage of that? Because I'm not really sure what the advantage. It could just be a throwback in this Wayback Machine. And what does this do? This Postgres SQL, what would that have done?
Sets it up as a Postgres database.
Okay. And if we don't include that, would it have installed anything else?
Yes.
Okay. What would it have installed?
SQLite.
Yeah, SQLite, right? And then skipGit is just skip it being a Git repository, right? And so, you know, I'm in this. I'm going to go back here. I just wanted to make sure, like, we're on the same side with what's going on. I'm in my server here. I'm going to go into books. Here we go. I have everything. I'm going to do a Git. I'm going to do an ls-a to see, and I see that it is a Git repo, right? And this would be an issue for me right now because I'm on the class repo. I shouldn't do this in the class repo. This would break this folder. If I pushed it up, it would just be like a gray folder in the class repo, and you wouldn't be able to go into it. And then I'd have to go in and like remove it, commit it, push it, it's gone, re-add it. So if I wanted to get rid of this folder being a Git folder, what would you do? On what? What?
rm.git.
All right, so if I do rm.git, watch what happens. Git is a directory. It won't allow us just to remove a hidden directory. And we could tell that if I did ls-al, I could see wherever Git is, when we get to Git right here, right? It is a directory, bloop, right there. Okay, so you just can't remove a directory. Unix is kind of like, whoa, like Linux is like, whoa, you can't just go ahead and delete that. There may be important stuff in there. So if we do rm-rf .git, that would remove it, okay? And it just removed it. Now what that does, the R is for recursive, and the F is for forcing, okay? Does anyone know what the recursion here would actually mean? If they said, oh, your work, and they're like, oh yeah, run the rm-rf command on blah, blah, blah.
All files and folders underneath that directory.
Exactly, but what does the recursive part do though? The R is recursion, the F is to force it to be removed without asking you. But what does recursion mean? Like you learned recursion, or the concept. Okay, so recursion is where, what's recursion in, say, JavaScript?
It's going to keep occurring until something forces it to stop, like the end of the loop.
Okay, so recursion in JavaScript is a function that calls itself. That's really a recursive thing, where a function calls itself, and that function needs to have a base case and a recursive case. Base case tells it when it should stop, otherwise it enters an infinite loop, right? If you don't know where to stop, you just keep going. At some point in time, you have to stop. That's recursion. In any language, that's recursion. Ruby has the same thing. If you call the method again and again inside of itself without telling it when it should stop, then it's never going to stop, right? It's like a while loop that you, or a for loop that you mistyped something, and now the thing is incrementing the number, but you told it to look for a number below that, and it's just going to keep going up, right? That's what recursion is here. It goes to the lowest folder in this directory structure in Git, gets the files in that lowest folder, deletes those files, then deletes the parent folder. Then it moves to the next lowest folder, deletes the files, deletes the folder, and it works its way back up. That's recursion. It will go all the way down the folder structure to the very last folder, delete the very last file, then the second to very last file in that folder, and then it works its way back up. That's recursion. Okay, that's how we forced it to remove. And if I do an ls now minus a, I see git is no longer here. I do have a git ignore. I don't mind that. Git ignore is good, but I don't want the get. Okay. So now that I have my server, I could start this server, right? Rails. I could do server, or I could just do S. Either one. I like just doing S. Now I start this. This isn't like React where it opens up. I have to go here and do localhost 3000, and boom. Hey, yay, you're on Rails. Sweet. We got Rails running on our server. So,
Joe, are we supposed to be doing this?
yeah. If you, I'd like you to kind of code along. So I'll give you a moment.
Okay.
I mean, this is the lecture. You're going to have a lab to do also, but you know, I'm going to take this really slow. So coding along would definitely be in your benefit. So if you just go to a folder and run the command that I had slacked out, which was just this. This was the command I want you to run, not the other one with the API. So I'll just do this. I am going to I'm just going to put here, I'm putting a thumbs up. If you just wanted to follow along and not do anything, then click on the thumbs up so I know we're all on the same page. If I see only 2 thumbs up, I'm waiting for 7 other people to click on it, okay? So all I really wanted you to do was run this command. Have that command run, open up your text editor, I'm using Sublime, and open up that project so we can see what's happening and then just confirm that it works. Okay?
Joe, quick question.
Sure.
When I ran Rails server, it's giving me an error saying cannot find Jim's SQLite.
Oh, okay. So let's do this. I'm going to go out of this. So, and you're in the books directory. I'm going to go out of the directory and I'm going to run Rails S. I just want to see if I get the same error. All right. So I get an error about something, right? Hey, cannot create, you know, it's, let me see. This isn't what you're getting, right? The usage command, correct?
No, it's
okay. So you're getting some. Is anyone else getting an error? Just curious.
I'm getting run Rails web Packer error, and I don't know what that means.
Got it. Try doing Rails -v and tell me what version you have. Rails has recently changed. Like last night, we realized in order for the students to go through the tutorial, we needed to do something on their machine because Rails now, as part of the tutorial, like if I went to the official Rails site and was going to look through, not Rails clothing, the Rails website, and look through their guides, they clearly say like Rails 5, right? Oh, Ruby on Rails guide 6.0. There are new guides based on 6. So it's changed. Like it's almost like React changed something and you're like, damn, I just got to learn all this stuff. And now like React switched something up and like these things aren't available anymore in that version, right? Rails kind of made that leap now where there's guides. The new Rails guides for Fire are based on 6.0, and so there's other guides that are happening out there. So what version does everyone have?
6.0.
6.0?
Yeah.
So good. Yeah, you should all have. I'm sorry, Tiffany?
I had that Thursday in class, but today running it, it still says could not find gem SQLite after I ran Rails-V. And does it matter if the installs that we did on Thursday, that should have been global, right? No matter what folder we were in?
Yeah, yeah, the Rails install will be global. The other thing that we could do right now to try to resolve this, okay? In a day, I don't know what your issue is, but maybe we could figure this out. Is that there's this gem file, right? What is this gem file for? What does that do? Does anybody remember from Thursday to Wednesday's class what the gem file is? What's its comparison to Node?
Like package.json.
Correct. It's a package JSON file. And so in this package JSON file, it says gem SQLite, right? And Tiffany, yours should also, oh, yours didn't spin up, right? Yours created the server, but you just can't start it. Is that correct, Tiffany?
Repeat the question again.
Is your server, do you actually have the server files? Let's start with
Yes,
that.
I have all of that. Yes.
Okay. And in the server file, you should have on line 9.
I do. Yep. I
Okay.
do.
So let's just say, I'm going to try to solve your problem in this way. Let's say I needed to install the packages in Node. I downloaded your app and I don't have all the files. In Node, what would you do? What would be the command you run in order to install everything that's inside of the package JSON that's being referenced? What would you run?
npm install.
Okay. How do you do that in Rails?
There's a command that says bundle install.
Yeah. So let's try, I'm just going to try bundle install, and let's try running that. Like mine already says that it's all done. Bundle complete, 17 gem files. Try running bundle install. I want to see if it finds the fact that you don't have SQLite.
I ran that and it gives me a permission denied. Okay, let me try
Sudo, right? Okay. That's what I think is happening. I think what might happen is you just don't have SQLite installed and it's referencing it, but it's not installed. I think that's what's probably happening. Because no one else got that error, right? Everyone is pretty good. You got your servers all up and running. I'm going to go back and just take a look. I got...
I'm getting a Webpacker error.
Yeah, I have that error too.
Everyone's getting Webpack errors. Interesting. I'm just curious what... so I think what we might have to do...
That's the wrong one.
Yeah, I think maybe brew update. I'm going to try brew update Rails. I want to see error. This command brew itself does not take the form of brew upgrade.
Webpacker.
Oh yeah, brew. I'm just going to try this upgrade Rails. Once again, we had some issues on Friday, and the issue was, and my IA brought it to my attention, was this Webpack thing. He was like, oh, we can't really do this anymore because the Webpack is now using, Rails is now using Webpack in order to do this stuff. Homebrew updating, Homebrew 3 tab, no available formula with the name Rails. Let me just see, I want to see what command we ran. Update Rails, because I think, I'm just going to take a look at the lecture the other day just to see when Rails was installed, what was done, Rails. Right, Rails V, right, gem install Rails, okay, yeah, I'm just thinking, if you have version 6, why would it not? And everyone confirmed. All right, so I see we're getting that error. Let's just take a look here. Please run Webpack install, no such, okay. Webpack run Rails Webpack install. No such file direct Webpacker YAML. Right. I'm going to just take a look and quickly see if I can figure out what that error means. Right file gives error. Can't install Webpack in existing Rails 4 app. I don't know why this would cause an error just to run a Rails server. Running the run. Don't know. Webpack. Webpack install. It told me that my version of Yarn was out of date, so I updated. Then I reran with it. I got this message. I assume I'm doing something wrong. Bundle rake. Interesting. Did it work? I'm just curious. Did it work for anyone? Did anyone click on the thumbs up at all? No one. It's not working for anyone.
Just another, I got mine after I did the sudo, but now I'm having the same issue as everybody else, the Webpacker.
Okay, and so I'm going to guess that's everyone's problem because no one clicked on the thumbs up. It says it needs to install Yarn. Paul, did you try installing Yarn? And Ryan, I don't, if it's the Rails new books commands in Windows, PC and Windows, I think so. I can't really say. Yes, so far no luck. All right, so Yarn did not work, correct? All right, if Yarn did not work, I'm curious if this command here, because you all ran this command the last time. So I'm curious if this command here, I'm going to just try running this one. Okay. I'll select this out. Yeah, it was the previous command. I want to see if there's just an issue. So get out of the folder that you just created books in. So go back up to the, parent directory. So you're not inside books. Run that command. Okay. I want to see if it's just something to do with running the Rails server just like that that's causing the issue. Unless something just happened between Wednesday, because you were able to go through the install, you had labs, you did the labs. So I can't imagine what would be the problem right now. I'm just curious. Brendan, can you test it out also? Can you test out just running the Rails new books command? I want to see if you get the same error.
Yeah, I got you.
You just linked works as a server on mine.
Okay, so yours works using just the Rails new books command?
No, it doesn't. It breaks with that one. It needs the Webpacker. It works with the API command you just sent.
Got it. Okay.
Same here.
Yeah, I think, yeah, so Rails not working without, I don't know if it's the API command itself or it's, I don't think it's the Postgres command. We don't need Postgres for this to work. It should work without it. Yeah, Rails errors missing. They just did this. Okay, when there's this update. Webpack dev server not found, and then it breaks everything. Run Webpack dev server not found. Rails new test. Webpack Rails new. Rails ban Rails error command. Maybe it is a sudo install Webpack server. This looks like it's Node and Express though, right? Run Yarn. That doesn't look like Rails.
Yeah, what version of Ruby are you running? The latest one?
Yeah.
I don't think I've updated in a while because mine worked.
Got it. I think it's the new version, and I think one thing needs to get done.
Yeah, I'm running 2.6.1, and the Rails new books ran fine for me.
Oh, 2 point. Oof, you're way behind.
Yeah.
Way behind the curve. Webpack install, Webpack is not found, JSON. All right, I'm going to just see if there's anything in here. Where's your Webpack? Rails version 5. I want to update bin, so now I have the bin folder. Still can't get through the error. The issue is found. Just looking to see if there's any errors. Webpack bundle not found. Why would this Rails Webpack install? Which I'm going to try running. Did you run a Rails Webpack install? Let me just try this. I want to see if maybe this is it. Rails. No, doesn't. That's not the command. Right, Webpacker usage, new Rails. Yeah, it's not going to do that. All right, I think we'll just have to go with the other server. We'll just have to go the other route. There was just a few things here I wanted to kind of point out, but if they're not here, we're just going to have to kind of move on.
So take a look at what Christy posted. She ran yarn and she ran that command code and it works for her.
Okay. So after I installed yarn, I ran this. Okay. Bundle Rails. Okay. So do what Christy just suggested. And installing yarn, Chrissy, how'd you do it? Did you use Brew? What'd you do to install yarn?
I just use Brew, yeah.
Brew install yarn?
Yeah.
All right, so run Brew, install yarn, and then run the other command that Chrissy just suggested. Okay. Did you find that on a specific site to say go through that process?
Well, it sort of prompts you to install yarn.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah, I found it on Stack Overflow,
Got it. Okay.
the other command.
Got it. I knew it was 2 commands. I didn't realize my IA quickly did it for me, and so I didn't really see what she was doing. She said, we need to do this, and ran it, and then give me my computer back to me. So I'll give everyone a moment. And I'll do this. I'm going to add click, thumbs up, if it's resolved. Okay. Click the thumbs up if that resolved your issue. It worked for Chrissy. If it's holding anyone else back, let me know. Okay. Sweet. Paul, awesome. There we go. Seems like it's working for everyone. Yeah, Ryan, are you going to have any issues since you're on a PC? I'm just curious.
Yes. I've had issues for the last couple days.
Got it. Yeah. How were you able to work through the last class on Wednesday then?
Not very well.
Okay.
I've had to install multiple programs and do Linux and do all these different methods of trying to figure this out, and it works up to a certain point, but once it tries to connect with Post, it just fails.
When you mean post, it tries to connect to like post something to the server, or?
Yeah, when it tries to connect to the server.
Got it. Okay.
But at the same time, I have like 3 different programs running at the same time, and I'm completely clueless on which one, what they do. So
yeah.
I'm just gonna listen, and
Okay.
hopefully I get a Mac down the road.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's one of the issues when it comes to supporting. And when it comes to like PCs and Windows, my current class, there's no PC, like there haven't been a lot of PC users. And so these issues aren't really well documented on our side. So just watch, maybe you'll just be the Node Express guru.
Maybe.
All right. So let's see, I'm gonna make sure it looks good. We got 5, awesome. Okay. Everyone else good? 6, sweet. Okay. Who else? Anyone else? You sure you're good? You're good? Click on the thumbs up. You're good. Did you click on it? Not yet.
I'm just waiting for the install to finish.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Roderick, you're good? If you are, I'm just going to give another minute and then I'm going to jump in and we're going to start working. Okay. Okay, the intro thing connected with an error because his method worked perfectly. Sweet. Okay. You know, that being said, I'm going back to the books server. Okay. If it worked, I'm going to start my Rails server. Just make sure it's up and running. Okay. I'm going to test it. Just make sure it's sweet. It's up and running. It's good. No issues there. Okay. Awesome. Why don't we do this, since I think one or two people just need to get themselves up and running, making sure the thing is installed. Why don't we we'll take a 10-minute break. When we come back, we'll jump right in and start working through it. Okay. So if you have any issues, let me know. Reach out to me and Brendan right now. We can help figure it out. If not, I'm just going to step away, go grab some water. I'm going to go once, go twice. Awesome. Okay. I'm going to just jump off real quick, go get some water. I'll be back. Let's come back at, I don't know, 11:02 maybe. Let's do this. Break time. Come back at 11:02. There we go. Okay. We are over those issues. Now we are on to the rest. So we got past that. Okay. So when I start my server, and I have my server running here, right? Just going to make sure, still running. Everything looks good. Refresh. Awesome. I'm going to stop my server. And so if you wanted to, kind of like, I suppose, Node and Express, we could start the server on different ports. So if I start the Rails server on port 3001, right, I wouldn't have any conflicting issues with React. React could spin up, although React is really easy at changing the port number, right? Here, it's 3000. If there's two servers starting on it, that may be an issue, okay? So we can start it on different ports if we wanted to. So I did start it on 3000. And then the files that you had taken a look at last time were the, what'd you do? You did inside of app, you did models, right? Models was one of those files that you had looked at the last time. And then in DB, you had created the migration files and then populated the seed file with some data, right? So here, we haven't done anything. And so we just have a bare bone server. And I'm really separating our server now from the back end just to kind of focus on routes. And then the next lecture, we'll jump into building out the back and then adding the front as well. All right, so one of the things with our server is this. In order to, or an easy way to install some of those packages, like if I go back to the gem file, I did see SQLite, and we're like, we don't want to use SQLite, right? That's the default that it comes with. We want to use Postgres. And so I would like to add Postgres to my gem file, and I could go in here and just write it out. I could say gem, Postgres. I could do that. But there's this other tool called Gemrat, okay? So I'm going to select this out. Open up another tab. So I have my server running, so I really can't do anything, and I'm going to get tired of like having to turn it off, having to do something. So Command-T allows me to just open up another tab inside the books directory. One has my server running, one does not. And what if we did gem, if you did gem install, I already have it, gem install, Gemrat. What this will do is it's kind of like the npm install, and then it'll add it to the gem file, okay? So it should take just a second. And then if you do, and I'm in my gem file, so I'm taking a look here, it's gonna add it towards the end. I'm in my gem file, and if I was to run the command gemrat PostgreSQL, and we run this, it should add it to the file. Let's see, and so boom. So now I can add Postgres to the file. Just a cool little third-party tool that'll allow you to install it. Okay, while the server's running. And then if we do bundle install, it'll install all those packages. Okay, I think for bundle install, we have to stop our server. So I'm just gonna stop the server. Command K, I'll get rid of all my previous commands. I'll run bundle install, and that should install all of my dependencies. Everything that I might have been missing should now be installed. Okay. I got that from this little article. This guy, Jake Trent. He was also big into D3. He was writing some D3 stuff. Cool. Some cool stuff too. Okay. Cool. We got it. We have Postgres SQL, just showing you how to install additional packages if you wanted to include them in your gem file. Gem files already come with other stuff too. Like if you wanted to do bcrypt, which is, you know, hashing our password, something you did in Express, we could just undo this and then we have bcrypt. So there are a few things in here that would allow us to run some common things, I suppose. Like these are the common things that Rails is like, hey, yeah, let's use it. Okay. Awesome. Awesome. Okay. So one of the things that we want to do, just for testing purposes today, is on this Rails server, if I was to go to a route, like this default route works. Awesome. But what if I was to create another route? Oh, I have to start my server. Right? Rails S. Yeah, I'm going to say port 3001. Doesn't really matter at this point in time. I'm just... Hello? Oh, thought somebody was saying something. Okay.
Joe.
Yep.
Good question. So when we do the Gemrat installation, do we have to always remove the previous dependency we didn't want, like the SQLite, for example?
I mean, you could comment it out.
Okay.
We're going to tell it to use Postgres as our database. It will use Postgres as the database.
Okay, got it.
You'll see that later when we spin it up. But yeah, if you don't want it, then sure, right? If you didn't want it, then you could just comment it out. And then when you do the bundle install later on, it will make sure that this isn't part of it. Awesome. So let me get my server back here. Put this just back down a little bit. So in our server, we have all these files now, right? And like the last time was models, that was the big one, and the database, that was the other big one, and that's for, you know, the back-end side of things. We're looking at more of our routes, and so our routes are going to be inside of this config file. Okay, so some of the important folders and files, I think in here I did kind of point out the important ones, right? The app is going to have our controllers, our models, and our views. Our MVC framework is inside of app. That's where our MVC framework is. And what I want to point out too is this, like in the world of Express, sometimes, and it's done a lot, routes and controllers are kind of combined together in the same file. Sometimes they're called, you know, routes, controller, or something like that. Here in Rails, they are completely separate, right? Controllers is its own thing. Models is its own thing. And I really want to point that out because when I do discuss that, you know, the differences in lectures with some of the instructors about Node and Express, I kind of always emphasize that Rails does it this way. And it's probably in our best interest to kind of force that division so that when we move on to Rails, that pattern kind of follows through. And you're like, oh, we did it in Express, so now it's done here, right? The fact that it's being done here and so widely accepted, I think is a statement of on its own, right? I know if I go to Rails and if I want to see your models and your views and your controllers, your MVC framework, I know where to go to find all of those files, okay? All of them. So we're in the config now, which is the other one. The config is our, is where we're gonna have our routes. And if I go to the config right here, right? And there's lots of other stuff. And I know that Ryan had mentioned, do not worry about all the other files. You are concerned only with the files that you need to concern yourself with. Rails comes with all of this stuff. And at times people think it might be bloated. Just a server that installs all this additional stuff that maybe you don't need, but it comes with it anyway. Maybe it gets in the way versus starting from like a Node and Express server that you build from scratch, every little file, every little function, okay? But Rails allows developers who aren't that great with the backend to spin up a server, create it as an API, get a database, populate it, configure posting, updating, deleting information relatively easy versus Node and Express where the learning curve is a bit higher. Okay, but I'm in routes. So I have this Rails application.draw, routes, do, and so do is kind of that. Do the following. So what do we want to do here? Well, I want to go into this file, and I want to create, right? Once again, I was here on welcome. Is my server not started? Yeah, my server started. So that site can't be reached. I'm just curious. 3000 can, but I thought I would get another error. Yeah, here. This is the error I wanted to get. If I try to go to the welcome route, this is what I get. No routes match /welcome. That route doesn't exist yet. And it's no different than Node and Express, where you needed a route, right? This route doesn't exist. You would have gotten like get not found or something if this was Node and Express, but we're getting no route matches. Okay, well, I'm gonna get rid of that. I want to see that route. So I'm gonna go and I'm going to create that route. I'm gonna go here and I'm gonna say get, right? That's the method. Double quotes, welcome. That's the route. I want to point it to something, and I'm going to say welcome, pound, index. Okay. I'm going to see if this works. Let's just see if this works. I'm going to move the end over a little bit. And so we have our get method, gets that route. When you do go to this welcome controller and find the index method. That's the statement that this is making. All right, so I'm just going to write a note here. There's other ways to configure Rails. There's lots of different ways to configure Rails. Think of it like last Saturday when I was teaching Ruby classes. We went through the process of creating methods that would allow us to read and write to instance variables, and then we substituted those methods with what? Does anybody remember what we substituted those methods with? So instead of doing def name and then just returning the word name, we set something up at the very top of the class. Does anyone remember what it was? Feels like it's been forever, right? You haven't worked with classes in forever? All right. I was trying to go to REPL, pull up maybe one of those REPLs we did last week. Gladiators Arenas, maybe? The Gladiators class, let me see, 7 days ago. Let me just see if this has it. What's this? What does this do for us in the class, in the Ruby class? Who wants to volunteer that?
It allows you to read and write.
Yeah, it allows you to read and write to the instance variables. And without this, or without an ATTR writer or ATTR reader, you would have had to create instance methods that would have returned those values, okay? So I'm just showing you, you know, there's certain things, you know, that you're going to use and certain things that you're not going to use unless you're really creating this class. But these methods here allowed us to do something, right? And so here, when we go to welcome, we're going to look for something. We're actually going to get a different error message now, okay? So let's go here and try. So this is no route matches get. That's our first error. We should have all got that. Now if I refresh, I get a different error message. Uninitialized constant welcome controller. Okay. A route here, right? I'm going to put a note here. The welcome route needs to call a controller, okay? In this case, it's the welcome controller. See how they match? Like the welcome route is hitting a welcome controller. In the welcome controller, there should or there will be an index route, okay? Or an index, I'm sorry, an index method, okay? So welcome here is going to translate into a controller. Index is the method that we're looking for. So the welcome controller does not exist yet. So we need to go ahead and create that welcome controller, okay? There's another command, though, that we can run here called Rails routes. And if we run Rails routes here, you're going to see a bunch of routes. I'm going to go to the very top of these Rails routes. And we see that there is a welcome get route. There's a bunch of other Rails routes also. It's Rails post, a bunch of posts for inbound emails and blob representations. Don't worry about that. This is what I'm talking about right here. This welcome gets, welcome format, welcome index. This is our routes, right? So our route calls a controller and then an action. See here? I'm going to put that up here. And this is what's happening above this. Our controller action, okay? And then this becomes our route, okay? So we need, or we are missing, according to this controller, right? Our error is like, hey, you don't uninitialize constant controller. We need a controller in order for us to render back or tell Rails what to do. This is the route. I don't really know what to do at this point in time. So we need to create a controller to do this, okay? So if we go here and in our controllers, remember our app, there is model, views, and controllers here, and here's our controller, okay? And so we need a new controller created. This is where it gets very opinionated in what you type, okay? This is very specific about what we type here. So we're gonna add a file to controllers, and we're gonna call this welcome underscore controller.rb, okay? So we're creating that. Just going to select this out, add this file. Okay. Once we do that, it's empty. There's nothing in there. We're going to edit this. Okay. And when we edit it, we're going to create a new class. This was why it was important to learn classes last week. Because everything in Rails right now is going to inherit from a parent. So not only classes, but inheritance. So welcome controller inherits, that's what that caret sign means, from application controller. Okay? And that's what that means. We're going to inherit from this application controller. And you see here that there is an application controller right there, right? There's our application controller. And application controller is inheriting from the application controller base, whatever this is. Like there's a method, I think, the : represents that this class has access to or can call methods or properties within it using the : So this is inheriting from that, and we are inheriting from it. Like this sequence of inheritance that's being passed down. Now, before I add the rest of this, I just want to see if this error message changes. If I refresh, oh, okay, I'm getting a different message now. The action index could not be found for welcome controller. So Rails is following the path, and it's saying, hey, we hit a route. It told us to hit this controller. Controller wasn't there, but is now. So let's go to the controller. Controller's there. This action is being asked for, but it's not present, okay? So we need to add the action. So I'm going to create a method, right? Def index, and I'm going to end the method. So I always create and end my methods. I always create and end the classes. I want everything. Oh, I think I have too many ends here. I think I created one more end. And then here I'm going to render, and I'm just going to say plain. And I'm going to say welcome to my Rails app. Okay, you can put whatever you want. And render plain is similar to Node and Express, where you would just render some HTML. I could have just said render res.render, right? In the world of Node and Express, I think it was res.render, and then I could have just put in here text, hello, right? Could have done that. I could have put in like an H1 and said hello. Could have done that, right? Didn't really matter. Here we're rendering plain text and we're sending back hello. If I go back here and I update it, I now get welcome to my Rails app. Okay? So I'm able to get my Rails info. Awesome. Sweet. Click here if you click here when you rendered a welcome message. Okay. Just click there, knowing that we're all on the same page. You're able to render a welcome message. Sweet. Awesome. Everyone's following along. Once again, if you didn't want to follow along regardless, just click on the thumbs up so I know not to wait. I'm going to assume everyone's doing their thing. Okay? Cool. Now we can render all sorts of things here. It's render JSON, right? So instead of plain text, I could render JSON, right? And that was also in the world of Node and Express. We could render JSON too, and I could say, you know, hello world. Could do that. And instead of just getting plain text, I get a JSON object. Okay? Sweet. We could also have stored the data. There we go. Just different ways to send it. I could say at data is equal to hello world, and then render JSON at data. Just make sure this works. Same thing, right? I'm going to change this. Hello, this is my hello world, my Rails app. Okay, I just want to change it to something so we can see that it is updating. Okay. Awesome. If we wanted to even send data, we have a method here that would allow us to send data if we truly wanted to. So if I was to render JSON, if I got rid of this, and I just said at data is equal to file.read, I could read from a file. I'm just going to say app assets. This doesn't exist. I would have to create it. Okay. And here's assets. And if I went to assets and said new file, data.json, and I just copied this little JSON object here, just copy that. I could put it in an array if I wanted to. Maybe I'm going to send multiple things. Hello world, goodbye world. Okay. I could send multiple things. If I go back to the controller and I go here, look, I'm getting multiple things. Hello world, goodbye world. It's coming back as an object. Doesn't look like it's doing it as JSON, but I'm able to send multiple things. Awesome. So this allows me to send data. Now, being the fact that we are going to be an API server, we're not really going to be sending JSON data using this file. Of course, we're going to have a database sending it, but I wanted to show you how the routes truly work, like kind of the magic underneath the hood of it. And if we wanted to send data, we could send data just like this, okay? Now, there's this other Rails command, okay? I'm going to do this, though. What I need to do in order to run this other command so we can see what it does is this. I am going to stop my server, okay? Now, the fact that I've created this welcome controller right here, well, that's going to be an issue if I try to run this command, okay? So watch, I'm gonna run that command. And I'm gonna say Rails G, I just need G. I can say controller, welcome index, okay? Watch what happens. I'm gonna get an error and it's gonna say something like, maybe see, it depends. Oh, it's telling me SQL. Bundler, error loading the SQL. Oh, you know what? I think it was that gem pack. Remember when I went to the gem file and I commented this out? I'm gonna re-add that. I think that's what's the error. Yeah. So that becomes an error. The fact that this was installed and is being referenced someplace is going to be an issue now. So now I get this message, right? The welcome is either used, and you should all be getting that, right? If you ran this, okay? But if you try to generate a welcomes controller and it already exists, it's going to say, hey, so are they used by your application or reserved by Rails? You know, I have to choose another naming convention for this. I can't just use this welcome controller, right? You may think like, oh, maybe I'll just, you know, get rid of that class and run it. Maybe that's what it's referencing. And it says, nope. It's now erroring out saying, let's see what the error there. Well, again, block active record adapter. I think there's another error. Welcome controller to define welcome controller constant, but didn't. We're getting some other errors. So what I'm going to do is just, I'm going to rename this. I want to see if I just rename this welcome control. I'm going to put like maybe an underscore before welcome controller. You wouldn't normally do that, but I just want to see if that does it. If not, no. So I really have to like delete this welcome controller. Okay? Leaving? All right. So I'm going to do this. Let's see. Now it creates it. Okay? Awesome. Okay. Sweet. Just give me, I just need to step away for 30 seconds. Just give me 30 seconds. I'll be right back. Okay, sorry about that. So now that I've done it, watch all that it created for us. It took us back here and it created this route. It created the welcomes controller file, right? It has an index there and it's like, hey, I'll create it for you since that's what you asked for. Awesome. Let me go to the routes, right? We have our routes here. Didn't really change anything there. That was us when we were doing it, I believe. Or I think maybe it added this, right? I think it added this because we had just this before. So now that I've had this, now that I've added this, it did create, look what it did too. Create the app controllers welcome RB, route, get welcome index. It added that route. It invoked ERB. It created an app views welcome, an app views welcome index HTML.erb, created this test, this helper, this assets, created a few things for us. Now if we go to welcome, what do we, oh, I have to start the server. Oh, no, it did. Yeah, there. That's different, right? Where do you think that information is coming from? Because I didn't type that information out. Where do you think that would be coming from based on what we just saw here?
app/views/welcome/index.html.erb.
Yep, that's where it's coming from. So if we go back into our app, right, which is really the MVC, and I go to views, and I go to layouts, I now have, oh no, I'm sorry, I go to views, I go to welcome, here's my index file. Now this should look kind of similar to what file template type?
HTML.
Yeah, and you were using, previously you were using EJS, this is ERB. This is the ERB file, and we're not going to be working with ERB. I just want you to see that in Node and Express there was EJS, and you did work with it. And then we quickly moved over to, moved over to React. And we're going to be using just React. But I wanted you to see that now it is sending back a corresponding index HTML file with the information that it put there by default, right? I mean, we could put whatever we want in here. I could add a, if I wanted to add an H2, right? And so welcome my first ERB file. Yay. Right? It's not really yay. You don't really want to work with this stuff. I'm going to go back here. Look. So now I can send additional information. I could take a whole structure in HTML and send it. I could create to-do lists. I could send it. This is server-side rendering. We don't want to do this. But it's good for you to see it because when you're out there, they may do this, right? Not everyone's using Rails and not everyone is using React. Lots of companies are still using templated side serving, and Rails you might be working on a server that does. But what's important here is this. The route got hit, right? So if we go to the routes here, right? Where's my routes? Routes is in the config. Whoop, right? Config has routes, and it says welcome. That's our route. Our route hits a welcome controller that's looking for a welcome method. So then I work my way up to my welcome controller. It's looking for that file. Here's my welcome controller. It's looking for a def index. And the fact that we did not include a method to send, right? Because if I did do render plain, if I did this, let me see, plain, is it render plain? Hello, is that it? Let me just make sure it's render plain. Yeah, hello. If I was to run this again, look, I get hello. If you are missing or you default to not rendering anything, if you leave this empty and you choose not to initiate the render method, then what it does is says, hey, go look inside of the views file, look for a corresponding welcome folder for the welcome route, look for a corresponding index file or a file called index.html.erb that corresponds to the index route that we're sending. You see how really strict Rails is? You have to do it the Rails way. There's like, hands down, there's no other way to do it. You gotta do it the whole Rails way, okay? So I'm just kind of showing you just how really opinionated this platform is. You don't really have the freedom. If I went down here and I changed index to be something else, it would break. If I called welcome something else, right? If I renamed welcome, and I put it under, I wonder if I put an underscore here, would that break it? Look, welcome controller index is missing a template, right? Because I renamed something, because I decided I wanted to call it my own things. You can't call it your own things. You have to do what Rails tells you to do. There's no other way around that, okay? Sweet. Why is that? Examine the Rails controller, all right. So we noticed that we created all those files. We saw some style sheets too. So obviously at some point in time, we're going to want additional routes. Now I'm going to go back here and I'm just going to run the Rails routes command again. Let me just take a look. Let's see what we get. Here's a bunch of routes. I'm going to go to the very, actually, I'm going to clear out everything that's in my terminal, run it again. So I can just go to the very top. Okay, there's a lot of stuff. And here I have this welcome index and the welcome route. Okay. And they're both getting information. Okay, they're both running pretty much the same thing, right? This is format if we send it anything. So what if I wanted the additional routes, this post, delete, patch, right? Do I have to go in here and do like def, post, def? Do I have to do def, I don't know, show, something like that? Would I have to do this? I don't really want to have to do this, right? I mean, you are going to need supporting methods, but we can use the resource keyword, okay? So if we are trying to build out our CRUD app, right? We might have to do what we did in Express, which is pretty time consuming. We can use this resource keyword. So add this to the config routes resources RB. All right, so routes is in config. Go to routes and in here, and if I add this keyword resources, all right, resources, I'm going to create another route now. That's basically what we're doing, creating a route called books. So I'll just see here, the books route, right? That's the name of our app. Books routes. I'm going to put here routes, plural, too. If we do this, and I run Rails routes again, once again, I'm going to clear my screen, Rails routes. I go to the very top. Look, I have all of these routes created for me. I didn't have to go out of my way and manually create them. It's created all of these different routes. We have our to welcome. Now it has a books get, a books post, a new book, an edit book, get one book. We could patch, put, and delete one book also, right? So we have all these routes, and we have this. What would that be considered again? The colon ID. What does that translate into? What's the need for that colon ID there?
The ID in the database.
Yeah, right? And we call that a what?
An identifier.
It is an identifier, but say in the world of Node and Express, we referenced it as what?
Index?
It was more so like res or rec dot what?
Body?
Well, rec dot body is when we sent body using the body parser. Was it rec dot params? That ring a bell? Remember, rec dot params is how we sent params. If it was rec dot query, that's how we sent a query string. It's the same thing. This is going to look almost identical, okay? Now, if we go ahead and we do Rails generate controller books, right? So I'm gonna go here. Let me see if my server stopped. Let me see if it just will do it with my server running. I don't think it is. I'm gonna stop my server. I'm now going to go ahead and create that Rails generate controller books. Let's see what happens now. I have my routes, but if I was to do this, can I terminate this? Hold on a second. I want to do Rails S because I want to see if the books routes is there. Like what happens when we go to localhost 3001/books. Nothing, right? Rails controller, getting nothing. Site can't be found, nothing. I want to make sure. Oh, it's 3000 because I didn't change the route, right? All right. If I go books, look, I get this uninitialized constant books controller. Books. Now I could go through the process of going here, creating the controller. The controller would then want to render something, so I'd have to render something. Or we could just run Rails generate controller books, right? And if we do this in the controllers, you will see a books controller get created. In views, you will see a books view get created. And boom, both got created. Books controller and a books view, right? Here's our books view, right? There's nothing in there yet. And so, let me see if I start Rails server, see what happens. Would I get the same error? Oh, on the action index could not be found for the books controller. So it didn't add the action. I'm surprised because I could have sworn it added the action when we did the previous books, the welcome controller, right? Maybe it's because, no, Rails generate book controller books. And here I had, yeah, I had index at the end. So that created the index, right? So the fact that I left that off means I don't have my index route. And if I go back here to the controller, I need to include an index, right? So if I go back here, I would have to say now def index and, right? If I do this, now let me see. Do I get books? Oh, books controller index is missing a template. So the fact that I didn't create or include the index, well, that just kind of broke everything, right? So now I'd have to go and create those files because the view here didn't create the supporting file. So I do have the index, right? So if I just copy this, if I copy and I paste it into books, right? Now I'll have a books index ERB, and I could just say, hey, you know, welcome to all my books, right? That should, I say that probably should work, right? There you go. Welcome to all my books. Okay, that's how opinionated React, I keep saying React. That's how opinionated Rails is. Forces you to do it its way, but at the same time, if you do it its way, if you include specific generate commands and you give it additional parameters, it will spin up a server that's almost ready to rock and roll. All you got to do is like create the migration file, you know, create the database migration file, seed the table, and then you're ready to rock and roll and start sending data back and forth at that point in time. Okay? Sweet. Awesome. Any questions so far? All right. Because what I'd like to do is have you do a little app. This routes controller views in here. So let me go. Rails controllers. Here's a lab file. Rails controllers. This is the actual one. Let me Slack this out. Okay. Now, what I wanted you to do also in this lab is to create additional, I wanted to test your branching skills in Git. So when I had manually created the routes, when I manually created the controller, I didn't want to have to go and delete the controller file and then run the command. I kind of wanted just to be able to go to a previous version where I didn't have it. And so that versioning would come from creating additional branches, okay? So you can still do this. Once again, you can create as many branches on your student folder. You know, the forked version doesn't matter. You're not going to push up the branches, so it really doesn't matter. And you're in a Git repo if you did it. Or I think the instructions here have you creating this folder on your desktop, right? So because I knew ahead of time that it would create a Git repository, and then that might throw you off at that point in time, right? I don't want you pushing up a Git repository. If you decide to create this folder, this To-Dos Rails App Lab, inside of your, say, student directory, if you were creating one, then you must delete the .git folder. Otherwise, you're going to have issues when you push it up. You're just not, you're going to see a grayed out folder. So if you create it on your desktop and you do the Create Rails app, it'll spin it up as a Git repo. Okay, there's no need to turn it into a Git repo. So we're going to have you update gem to include Postgres. So you saw how we did it before. Spin up the server on 4000, see that it's working. Then I want you to commit everything to master. Okay, and this is what I meant. If it's on your desktop, then it's cool. You can do whatever the hell you want. Here, then you're going to generate 2 additional branches, manual and generate. Okay, and then you're going to check out the manual branch so that on the branch you could do a bunch of stuff, right? And then when you want to like undo all those things, you could commit to that branch and then go to another branch, go back to master or the generate, and you won't see those changes. So you can jump around a little bit, okay? And all you're going to do is kind of do what we just did, kind of generate a couple of branches, generate a route, make sure it works, sends back some data, something as basic as that, okay? Feeling good? It's not complicated lab. I don't think it's going to take 40 minutes. Probably going to take a little less than that, but you know, unless you get lost in like the branches and such. Cool. So just to do that, what do you think for time-wise? What do you think? What do we got? Quincy, what do you think? I say 40 minutes. What do you think?
Yeah, 45 to an hour. Yeah, that's fine.
You pushed it up. Okay. I was hoping for like, yeah, 20 minutes. I can do this thing in 20 minutes. All right. I'm going to, let's do this. I don't think it's going to take 40 minutes. I'm going to say, let's try maybe, I'm going to do it for 20 minutes and then I'll check back in. We'll see how you're doing in 20 minutes. We kind of got a lot to do today. I'm going to give you 20 minutes now. We'll check back in. Actually, you know what? We'll do it for the 30 minutes so you can take a break also. Okay. So I'll do it for 30 minutes. And we'll include the 10-minute break as well. So if we do it for 30 minutes, let's say it's 11:50, 12:20, come back. Okay? So work on the lab for 30 minutes, 20 for lab, 10 for break. And I will... And let's see where everyone is at 12:20. Boom. Okay. If you have issues, just reach out to Brendan and myself. We'll jump in. I will put everyone into breakout rooms. I'm going to put everyone into individual breakout rooms. So you just get everyone in there. Brendan, I'm going to make you the make co-host. Sweet. Boom, 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 boom. All right. Couple of more. Sweet. Put everyone in a breakout room. Yes. There you go. Open all rooms. Oh, yeah. Still waiting on the open all rooms button.